Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and warm welcome to the July meeting of the ICB. Just to remind everybody, this is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. The meeting will be recorded and uploaded onto the website. And as we go through the meeting, we will take the papers that we've got in front of us as read alongside the presentations that will accompany them. We've got apologies received today from John Rouse, Patrick Flaherty, Josie Spencer and Megan Nurse. There's nothing else okay, nothing else comments since I was advised of those apologies. And if we, as we always do at the start of the meeting, if we can go first to our leadership compact, just to remind ourselves of the compact and that it guides the way that we do business in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. This document is presented to every meeting that is conducted across the system. We'll return to it at the end just to check that we've adhered with the principles contained within it at the end of the meeting. We've got the conflict of interest register at enclosure 2. I'll just pause for a moment. Are there any conflicts of interest that any member of the board wishes to raise specifically on today's agenda? No, thank you. And we will then take the minutes held on the 15th of June. If we can go through those first for accuracy. So we'll get those up, just bear with me. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3, page 4, and 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Just check, is everybody happy with the accuracy of those minutes? Okay, thank you. Thanks to the team who pulled those together. Matters arising the action log, we have no actions arising from the last meeting for consideration of today's meeting. Has anybody spotted anything as a matter arising that we need to bring forward from those notes? Okay, thank you very much, colleagues, for that. Moving into item 6, I'm grateful to members of the public who've submitted questions in advance of today's meeting. I'm going to hand over to Tracy Shewan, who's going to take us through those questions with Mr. Hoey, Mr. Syme and Ms. Banks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. First question is from Derek Hoey. He says, since the demise of the CCG and the formation of the ICB, the previously extremely active district patient group in South East Staffordshire has effectively been terminated and the patient voice has been deprived of hitherto an effective channel of communication. What plans does the board have to actively engage with patients and reinstate the facility which enables patients to make a positive and ongoing contribution to the development of local health plans? I believe I'm taking the answer.
You're taking Mr. Hoey's question as well, Tracy.
So thank you, Derek, for your question. As you all know, through the development of our strategy, we undertook an engagement exercise with our communities about how they would like to be engaged by the Integrated Care Board when it came into being. This included groups that were not able or willing to join the existing groups and forums that the CCGs had. The local principles that was developed on the back of that engagement highlighted we needed a range of options, not a one-size-fits-all. And we should build on what we already have, but we definitely need to add to it. There are places for groups like the district group, and we recognise the valuable role PPGs and groups that come together as PPGs play. But we need to recognise they won't reach everybody. The groups themselves acknowledge they're not representative of our wider populations. At the People and Communities Assemblies, we aim to shape how we engage with our wider communities. This is more about us tailoring and adapting our approach depending on what it is that we want to talk about with our community. We also have established a patient voice inbox, which will allow people that generally what they're made up the sort of the PPGs and district to come through with their patient experience stories that we can collate where people don't want to make complaints or PALS inquiries, that they can actually let us have that soft intelligence so we can understand our services. So we're working currently with partners to develop stakeholder maps for each of our portfolios. So we can look at what each portfolio and operating portfolio needs in order to engage with their communities. You'll probably know that we have been doing some involvement exercises. I think the latest you saw was around inpatient mental health in the South East, which saw a range of people and a range of opportunities for people to engage with that. So even though the district patient group was one source of information, what we're looking at now is to ensure we widen that and widen the involvement for our communities that didn't perhaps reach us as they should have done previously.
Yeah, Tracy, thank you very much for that. And hopefully that answers the important question that Mr. Hoey's raised with the board today. So can we move into Mr. Symon's question, please?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Symon's first question is that the NHS Race and Health Observatory published early this month, July 2023, a review of tests which indicate mental health. That review made some very strong recommendations, specifically that tests indicating the health of newborns moments after birth are limited and not fit for purpose for Black, Asian and ethnic minority babies and needed immediate revision. That's unusually strong language and emphasises very deep concerns regarding the APGAR for the detection of cyanosis and jaundice. Will it now be incumbent on all maternity service providers to ensure that the recommendations within this review are implemented immediately?
Okay. Heather, are you responding to that question?
I am indeed. Thank you. Thank you for a really important question. This report was actually published on the 11th of July, so it's fairly new. But you're right, it does highlight that the tests indicate the health of newborn are limited and not fit for purpose, particularly for Black, Asian and minority ethnic babies. So they do need immediate revision. There are a number of recommendations in that report, including immediate update of guidelines that refer to neonatal assessment by skin colour, medical devices used to detect jaundice and cyanosis, better education for parents and families to be able to spot the signs of jaundice, the data bank of open access images of previous cases, including healthcare education and training, the urgent need for education and training of healthcare professionals and clinical assessments of neonates from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, and further studies required, particularly into using APGAR, which has been around for a very long time, and how healthcare even professionals use this when assessing babies. In terms of your question about what we'll do with that and what our providers will do with it, this will go to the next local maternity and neonatal services board, where we will be having conversations with all of our maternity providers about implementations of the recommendations from this. What I can tell you in terms of a degree of extra assurance is that all of our maternity providers currently use devices for assessing jaundice already. So we'll be linking with them to just make sure that we've absolutely picked up the learning from this and linking it to an additional report that came out earlier in the year, which I think most people will be as familiar with as some of the other maternity reports we talked about, which was the report into Black maternal health, which was published on the 18th of April this year, which again talks about disparity in outcomes. So we'll bring all of that together and bring some assurance through from the local maternity board. Thank you.
Heather, thanks for that. Moving to the second question.
Yes, just to follow up from that was how will the ICB and ICS assure that such recommendations are fully implemented, not just within our geographical boundaries, but also by any and all providers out of the area who may provide maternity services to our residents?
Yeah, I think I may have covered that off, but just to be absolutely clear, through the local maternity and neonatal services board, we'll link with all of our providers, including those out of area, to make sure that the recommendations are being picked up.
Thanks, Heather.
Okay, moving on, the next question is primary care access hub reinvestment funding was a full agenda item of the Stoke and North Staffordshire Primary Care Commissioning Committee, a subcommittee of then Staffordshire CCGs on the 3rd May 2022. The Darcy Centre was Stoke-on-Trent Primary Care delegated funding, and whilst concerns were expressed at this meeting around Stoke-on-Trent having such funding removed and or diluted, assurances were given that reinvestment plans may cover a wider area across North Staffordshire where deprivation exists. Is that still the case that what was Stoke-on-Trent delegated primary care funding is being fully reinvested in what were the Stoke-on-Trent CCG and North Staffordshire CCG catchment areas?
Chris, are you taking that?
I am chair, yeah, so for colleagues not aware, Hanley Walking Centre was closed in June 2022 following a review by the former CCGs as the question says. At the time it closed, it had been offering essentially open access to general practice for people in and around the Hanley area, and given its location, a proportion of the services delivered was to people who were experiencing homelessness. So since that time, we have commissioned extended access services from primary care network. So Monday to Friday, 6:30 till 8 o'clock in the evening, and then Saturday 9 till 5. And there's also a homelessness outreach service that's delivered through Northstaff's GP bed. And we've also committed some of the funding to support new investment in bariatric services through consultation with local medical committees. There is some residual funding that remains available from the former Hanley Walking Centre, and at the moment that's been committed to supporting cost pressures within the delegated GP services. So these are the services that we deliver on behalf of NHS England through the delegated agreement. There's a £4 million cost pressure in those areas which we've had to mitigate, including the redirection of uncommitted funds, of which the Hanley Walking Centre is part. We met with colleagues from the local medical committee on Tuesday, so earlier this week, and shared those plans with them at that point, and we're also committed to working with them on further direction of funds, particularly to enable targeted investments in areas that do experience deprivation, and that will continue throughout 2024.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Moving on to Claire Banks' question, please, Tracy.
Has the board made any plans to proactively begin working towards improving the access to NHS dentistry locally? Due to the national issue of a contract that's not fit for purpose, there are serious local issues with access to dentistry, attracting not just patients, but other NHS teams, for example, GPs, pharmacists, and A&E. Efforts must be made to improve oral health locally, and open discussion with some understanding of the current dental system is required. Steps must be made to improve access to prevention services for vulnerable groups, address the issue of a depleting workforce, consider flexible commissioning incentives to enhance the local dental service across the patch. As such, the question remains, has the board made plans to proactively begin working towards improving the access to NHS dentistry locally?
Chris, I think this is you again.
It is, yeah, and colleagues will remember that the what we call portal services, so pharmacy, ophthalmology, and dentistry, have been delegated to integrated care boards from April. As part of the board's own consideration of those delegations, we agreed a two-phase approach. So the first phase was to develop a detailed understanding of the issues impacting performance, particularly around dentistry. And we'll be sharing our assessment of that position to the Finance and Performance Committee in August. What we do know is that access to NHS dentistry remains a challenge. So for the year ending 31st March 2023, we delivered 75% of contracted activity. And it's perhaps no surprise then in that context that access levels remain below the pre-pandemic level, but we are expected to recover that by the early part of 2024, although it's worth noting that that's in and of itself is a fairly low base and there's more work to be done. As the question suggests, the main issues impacting access are reasonably well documented. It's effectively a combination of the national shortage of dentists and contract handbacks. The NHS Workforce Plan published recently commits to increase the number of training places for dentists. We expect that to be through expanding capacity at existing dental schools in the first instance, and it'll obviously take some time for that to filter through into local provision. In the meantime, there are national initiatives that we're working to implement, which will offer further incentives to the dentists to treat complex patients, in particular, incentivise dentists to see patients who perhaps not access the dentist for over 3 years. And the ICB is going to be given, all ICBs will be given greater flexibility to move contracted activity around between performers and also to rebase underperforming contracts where those contracts have not delivered the contracted level of activity for a 3-year period.
Chris, thank you. Tracy, I think that concludes the questions. Just again, want to thank members of the public for submitting those questions in advance. And to remind people who joined us in person today, but also online, that there will be an opportunity for further questions on any matter relating to the agenda of today's meeting as we move to the conclusion of the meeting later on. Okay, so we'll move on, if we can, to a very important part of today's agenda, our community story, particularly focusing today on learning disability and autism. Just before I introduce Chris Bird and Karen Webb to the meeting, I just wanted to say that when we consider two of the key elements of the quadruple aim of why integrated care systems exist to improve outcomes and tackle inequalities, this agenda is really, really front and centre. And as somebody who's just completed the Oliver McGowan training that everybody goes through as now mandatory training, if people haven't seen that training, they should really view the materials that are contained within it, because it is one of the most powerful training sessions that I've engaged in for some time. But we'll also be aware that over the past couple of meetings, we've recently signed off the Staffordshire County Council and Stoke, City of Stoke strategy into LB and autism. So today is a really powerful reminder of what it's like from the service user's perspective. And in setting the scene for today, we decided that we will give an extended period to the video that you're about to see to give Posey, the subject of the film this afternoon, ample opportunity to tell her story and then for us to reflect on it afterwards. So Chris, if I can hand over to you and Karen to take us through this element of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, David. So Karen, if I can invite you to so Karen is our lead officer for learning disabilities and autism, and has been an integral part of the strategies that the board has signed off in recent meetings. So our April meeting, we signed off a joint strategy around autism with Stoke City Council. At our last meeting in June, we signed off a joint strategy with Staffordshire County Council around people with disabilities and neurodivergence. And as I say, Karen's been a really integral part in both of those. So without further ado, Karen, I'll let you take the floor and introduce the video we're about to see, which I think really brings to life some of the issues that we've explored within those strategies that are written.
Thank you, Chris. So it is, as it says, we've got a learning disability and autism partnership. I think we've been going for about 2 years now, but I think we recognise there's very much to do. And it's not about the people that do learning disability and autism as a job, because often we do that job and we use it really, really well. But actually what Posey is about to tell you is about society. It's about everybody that doesn't have any experience of people with a learning disability and autism, and how we exclude, not on purpose, but we don't include these people. And actually some of the smaller things that we could do to make life worth living. So I think the Learning Disability and Autism Partnership, my plea today is we're going to be coming around probably each and every one of you for a bit of pledge about what you're going to do to help us change hearts, minds and thinkings and access. So that whilst Posey is a very young person, we are seeing health inequalities to the tune of people dying 20 to 27 years sooner than they should. So Posey will introduce herself, and I'm sure she'll give you, each of you, a side of the story that perhaps will take some reflecting on. So I'll leave the floor to her.
Thanks, Karen.
Rosie was diagnosed with sort of the severe classic autism. You know, she sort of ticked all the boxes in her own world type thing. She had no social interaction. If you said her name, she wouldn't turn. She wouldn't follow a point. You know, she was totally, yeah, she ticked all the boxes for classic autism. So yeah, she started her school life. She was always in the most severely autistic unit with just a few people. Yeah, very challenging behaviours as well to her autism. So her diagnosis was severe learning difficulties and global developmental delay. Yeah, so yeah, it was just assumed she didn't understand anything. And obviously she had no way of showing that she did, but we now know. Okay. W A was oh A S H E, which one? Look around. S-H-E L, okay, shall, O, of, A, P, good, P, E, can you do that? R, S, O, N, that's a shall and a person. The Lord, no. H, A, V, I, N, oh, careful, after the N, just go back to your N there, N, having, let me write that down, I'm going to go on to this one to slow you down, but having, W, A, good, way, T, 2, L, O, E, A, R, learn, A, N, and, S, H, A, R, oh, I think that, and share, think, a way to learn and share. I'll put on some music in a second, okay. So having a way to learn and share. Okay. And I. See? Oh, I thought it was going. See? Okay. Put your tissue. H. O. That's a funny sound like, isn't it? So having a way to learn and share my THOU. You want to go back to the U just to get yourself kind of calibrated. So get that U again. Go on. U. Okay, U. Slow down now. U. G. Slowly. H. Okay. T. Thoughts. H. A. Has. G. I. V. E. Given. And. Mid. A. L. I. F. It's going to be a line. W. O. R. T. Word. L. If I pronounce what if you want to, L. V. I. N. Has given me a light word with it. Given me a light word with me. Having a way to learn and share my thoughts has given me a light word. And I had looked into lots of different things. I did a course at university on autism, you know, tried to learn as much as I could. Obviously, when she was first diagnosed with autism. And everything kind of reinforced this same view of non-verbal autism. Yes, they don't understand, you know, this is what the life is going to be like. You're just going to have to sort of look after them and care for them. And I had looked at lots of different things, but most of the things were aimed at people with autism that were a bit more functional, you know, a bit more able. But this group of non-verbal, severely autistic students, I thought, oh, the name Unlocking Voices of the parent group. I thought, well, Unlocking Voices, that's what we need to do with Posy. So, because sometimes you see a little glimmer of something behind the eyes that's there, you know, and so I thought, well, I'll investigate this. It's local. I haven't got to fly off to America.
Hello, I'm Alex, Alex Hopwood, an RPM teacher. What is RPM? It stands for Rapid Prompting Method. Rapid really relates to our pace in communicating with students. We're not repeating things, we're not talking really slowly. We're presuming the capability to listen, understand, and increase skills. And when Posy came along, gosh, it seems like so long ago now, but she came along and I remember thinking, what low self-esteem, you know, you can't always get a sense of who somebody is until they can communicate, but she seems very hesitant, very shy, very timid. She's had a really dramatic transformation, you know, she smiles at people now, she's confident, she's happy to discuss things with peers, she generates her own ideas. She's actually an incredibly vibrant personality, so it's just been a pleasure to see that transformation.
So, to say how it's changed her life, obviously having a means of communication, I can't even begin to say in this short time how it's changed her life. Because obviously she can speak, she can make a choice, she can give opinions, she can share views, she can be educated, she can learn new things. I can understand her sensory issues more because she's spoken about them. Medically, physically, health-wise, the list is never ending on how it's just changed her life completely. And she has a goal and a purpose, wanting to help others, writing a book, she enjoys writing poetry.
I think H I N think W we and E need a sorry that way think you need a N A new U N B A R S T A N D I N understanding O of N O non S P E A A I N non-speaking so non-speaking A good U T I S of non-speaking autism W we A R E we are A N I miss you. Right, let's just go back to that you and just double check you and well done. C, E, misunder, S, T, O, O, D, you're misunderstood. G, R, O, U, group, and Y, Y, H, O, E, O, I, is, T, H, A, that, W, we, A, R, E, I hope, is that we are? E, B, we got I hope is that we are, go from there. E, D, U, C, A, T, E, educated, and E, A, and I, and meaning, A, U, L, L, meaningfully, A, and, and, E, and, E, O, good. W, don't we go? E, go. R, empower. E, yeah, E, empowered. T, two, E, A, and me, I, and meaning, A, U, L, meaningful, L, meaningfully, C, O, M, good. U, and I, C, A, good. C, empowered to meaningfully communicate. Meaningfully communicate. Including movement signing, not speaking autism. I was so misunderstood, and there are likely thousands like me. We are a misunderstood group. My hope is that we are educated meaningfully and empowered to meaningfully communicate. I'll just check if there's anything else. Brilliant. And E, A, and I, and meaning, I, is, W, H, A, what, W, we, and E, E. Meaning is what we need. And not, B, A, B, A, B, What's next? Y, baby. S, I, T, T, I, N. Oh, I think not babysitting. Just thinking that was the name. Meaning is what we need, not babysitting. Okay.
I think when we very first met Posey, I think we were all, most people on the board had been doing this job a long time, and I think it was a weekend of reflection. We've all been with somebody like Posey and assumed what she couldn't do. And what she's telling us there is, I've got so much talent, so much aspiration, so many dreams, but you're in the way, you, the royal you. And actually, she probably is somebody that would have come in through our transformed care agenda and probably would be in a hospital environment had her mum not fought so hard to get her what she needed. So I think, I'm hoping everybody got as many goosebumps as did.
Obviously, very, very powerful presentation there. And as I said in the introduction, it really brings together, doesn't it, the the strategies that Chris referred to, the joint strategy, but also that it's about outcomes and reducing inequalities. And screens that need to come through. And I guess just for opening up for any reflections from the board, because obviously we're being challenged today about what adjustments we can make for people who have issues like Posey. I'm aware that there was a conference a couple of weeks ago which referred to in Heather's quality report about the learning disability mortality review. 130 delegates came together, I think, and that seemed to be very positive. It gave service users the opportunity to feedback to people about how they'd like to see services organised. So it's just worth getting a quick flavour just for, what were the outcomes from that and how those are going to be overseen. I know that you probably referred to that during your report, but I think it'd just be good if we could just take a minute to reflect on that.
Yes, I think I also attended the event. It was a very good event. I mean, mortality is never a subject people really want to talk about. Most of the people in the room, their loved ones and themselves were alive, and so they were wanting to talk about health inequalities. So I need you to give me a longer GP appointment. I need you to make cancer screening more accessible. I need you to think about some of the sensory things that means I can get the treatment that I need. You write to me, I can't read it, so you discharge me because I haven't attended. So lots and lots of the comments were about how we prevent premature death. So the conference was a really good event. And it does give us a lot of work to do with learning disability and autism work, but it's not the learning disability and autism staff necessarily. We've got some work to transform and modernise there, of course we do. It's all of the other people that need to think about what they can do to make these things more accessible.
Thank you. Just take a few, any reflections from the board? Yeah, so Tracy first and Bobby.
Like you said, it's a very, very powerful story. And I'm left thinking, as someone who's got a sister with a severe learning disability as well, and have a significant input to, how do we get downstream of this? So if it's a child who's not as lucky to have a mum like she had, and I'm a sister who can navigate the NHS services, how do we get downstream of that so that we can help maximise the potential that they've got?
I guess a lot of it's going to be about integration and working together. So lots of the stories that we hear, we know about some of these children at birth, and we still get it wrong 18 years later. Some of it is about how education, social care, the NHS all come together and start to share information, share intelligence, plan for the future. There's lots and lots of opportunities to do things better, and it doesn't all come down to lots and lots of money either. It comes down to lots of collaboration. And listening, you know, in the learning disability and autism programme, we don't do anything about people with lived experience. And they will tell you how we do this if we listen, but we're probably a bit locked into what we've always done. So it's how do we think and how do we do things differently? And we use their experiences. Small changes make big differences. We don't need whole scale change necessarily. So there's no one thing that's going to fix this, but lots of small things might.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay.
Thank you, and some of the things I was going to say were already addressed. And I know you mentioned at the end that the learning disability staff, and there is something for me in the question that Tracy asked. It isn't necessarily about just us here, it's about the whole population. And Posey's story is not just around learning disabilities and autism, it's around every aspect of human contact that we have. It's about understanding how that person best communicates before we label them. There's also something about giving time to the people who can, because we could see in that place little things but important. You know, playing the music that calms her down, the time taken, the patience, but you know, in an acute ward, on an acute ward, that's not possible. That shouldn't be the environment, but people will need physical support once in a while. So it's thinking through the whole system, not just family.
Yeah, very well put. Okay. Neil?
Thanks, David. I agree with colleagues. Last week attended the College of Psychiatrists annual congress. 190,000 individuals up and down the country are currently waiting assessment with a potential diagnosis of autism. Put yourself into the position. I'm sorry, you do have breast cancer, but I can't treat you. Up and down this country at the moment, resources are so tight when it comes to learning disability services. We can make a diagnosis. I pay no, I'm not negative about Staffordshire, because many services are not engaging in the way they should be. And that's not just engaging, that's spending real quality time. And that intervention costs. But as a society, we're quite prepared to say where we prioritise our money. And I think we're just going to have another look at that, David.
Thanks, Neil. Julie?
I want to repeat what everybody else has said. So it is a really powerful story for Posey, but she has severe difficulties, and you know what we hear is the extent of severity will be different. I mean, Neil's just moved in terms of would we take the same sort of approach if it was a way to look at cancer. But my daughter works in school, she's a Senko, and I've too just recently done the Olive McGowan training, and it just surprises me that that's not available within education, because, and it's really difficult to actually get that, and I don't know how to do that, because the support that young people could have from Senkos within school, but the wider teaching population to understand that severity would be really, really important, and would possibly lead as well to less problems potentially with mental health later on in life.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, we've made some small investments, but school's where it starts, isn't it? We can get to these young people early enough. Olive McGowan's available to all CQC registered providers, which schools are not. So the e-learning is available to anybody and everybody, but the power is going to come with the experts by experience training, which we haven't quite launched yet. But that, we've got 30,000 registered staff we've got to get through first before we then have to think about everybody else, and then we've got to refresh. So it's about education, and it's how do we collectively then do that, and how do we move because again, it's not large sums of money, sometimes it's commitment, isn't it? And it's about willing to do something a bit different.
Okay, so Karen, that's been a really powerful interaction with the board this afternoon. Some challenges, you know, thrown down there. Neil, Bucky, Tracy, Julie and others. What I'd like to do is, on behalf of the board, I'd like us to write to Posey and thank her for sharing the story so well this afternoon, powerfully. If we could do that. And obviously for the board, you know, we've had oversight of the development of the strategies. We've had the conference. What we now need to do is to make sure those are brought to life. It's all right having the strategy, it's all right having documents. It's now down to how we do deliver them. And this is mission critical in terms of our ability to deliver, as I said, those two elements of quadruple aim of why integrated care systems exist. So Karen, thank you to you as well for all you're doing. And we will keep regular oversight of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move into the ICB Chair and Chief Executive. I'm going to hand over to Peter to take us through any exceptions. The paper's there as read. The only thing I wanted to add was something that's not actually within the paper itself. And that was that Peter and I went down before the paper was produced to see Anthony Marsh and Sir Ian Cummings, the West Midlands Ambulance Service, and had a really helpful exchange with them about the engagement of the ambulance service with our systems and processes. And we've had really encouraging signs that there will be regular attendance from people from YMAS at many of our meetings going forward. And in fact, at the executive time on Friday, we're actually represented there. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it was a really helpful visit, a really helpful exchange, and it's something we will be returning to over the forthcoming months. So Peter, if I could ask you to take us through any exceptions that you want to bring.
Yeah, just three things if I may. So the first one is you'll see details long-term work plan are in the report. It's fair to say it's a marathon, not a sprint, when it comes to addressing the plan. And the great news for us in the system is that we probably better than any system that I know are well placed, given the resource and capacity that we've got. But it does present some very significant challenges that we've got to address over the coming weeks and months, more fundamentally understanding how we'll deliver against the plan's ambition. So a great document in its own right, a lot of work to do. The second one is around the money, so I don't want to steal Paul's thunder, but we've obviously got a significant challenge at the moment. Month 3 days was an urgent, not great. So there's a lot of work to do in that regard. The last one, we are often quite negative in board meetings, but I just want to think about the 75th anniversary of the NHS. A great event, a lot of great events held nationally. So really pleased that we all come together and celebrate that.
Thanks, Peter. Just pause. Any of the items are picked up on the agenda. Anything anybody wants to raise from the report? If not, we note that and we move into the EPRR annual report. And Katie will take us through that. And we've had a number of recommendations that will come to. Bill, I think, are you introducing?
Yes, okay, Chair, I'll just do a very brief introduction. I'll hand over to Katie Weston, who is our EPRR strategic lead for the ICB, to take us through some of the detail. So the annual report on emergency preparedness, resilience and response covers a number of areas, but I would like to just draw on a few bits before I hand over to Katie. So EPRR over the last several years has seen significant growth in terms of the importance and recognition and the vital role it's played, particularly during the pandemic. And certainly sections 5 and 6 of the report set out the vast number of instances in the last year where we've been required to use EPRR methodologies and principles to support us managing either formal incidents or events that have happened that we've chosen to deploy an EPRR response. So we've seen a great deal of success there. We've also seen positive feedback from regional colleagues in terms of how we've responded to specific incidents. As a system, we welcome this increased profile for EPRR and the recognition of value that it brings. But I guess we also accept that with the increased profile, and certainly as you move to the category 1 responder, which is what the ICB now is, comes an increased level of standards and best practice standards that we need to meet. There's been a recently overhauled national framework in terms of EPRR, and I'll set out in the report the number of standards has significantly increased. And whilst, as Katie will outline, we are not compliant overall and therefore not where we want to be at the moment, we've got a great deal of work underway and clear plans to move us towards that level of compliance. I'm going to hand over to Katie now just to take us through the specifics around the core standards, the improvement plan, and then just highlight the EPRR policy.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Chair. So as Phil has set out, the paper presented sets out the annual report for EPRR this year, drawing on key features such as the core standards assurance process for 2022, the improvement plan in order to move us towards that greater level of compliance, sets out a number of incidents that we dealt with to kind of demonstrate the capacity of the organisation to respond, and sets out our sort of commitment to training and development of staff to make sure that they're in a confident position to respond to any incidents that may arise. So in particular, I wanted to draw you to section 4, which really looks at the core standards annual assurance process for EPRR. So just to give a bit of context and a bit of background, the annual assurance is done on a self-assessment basis against a nationally mandated set of standards. It really features on a common and best practice approach, covers all trusts, NHS providers and ICBs. So you'll note at 4.5 and 4.6 there we set out the number of standards that apply to the ICB as an organisation. So as a CCG previously, we were applicable against 29 standards at a lesser standard depth than we are now, recognising that uplift in ICBs as an organisation. So we are now assessed against those 47 standards. So as I mentioned, they're applied in greater detail against the legal duties as set out in the Civil Contingencies Act. As Phil alluded to, it's also been a more robust process over the last 12 months. There was a real drive from NHS England to uplift that following COVID-19, re-energise it and really drive forward that best practice across the EPRR agenda and national profile. So as Phil said, we were not compliant for 2022 following that robust process. It's worth noting here, just to offer some context, that across all of the 47 standards, the ICB is compliant across all of them. However, in terms of reaching that final rating, we are required to show full compliance across a number of standards, which is set at a 77% threshold to reach that partial compliance. So as you can imagine, really driving that best practice. In terms of other ICBs, as set out in the document in section 4, we're comparable with the other ICBs in the region. So of the 11 ICBs across the Midlands, 9 were non-compliant and 2 were sat at partial for 2022. As demonstrated in the 15 plus incidents that we dealt with over the last year, NHS England are assured that as an organisation we can stand up and respond to any incident, no matter the nature and scale of it. And we continue to do that as we see today with the industrial action taking place across the NHS. So section 5 moves into the improvement plan and how we're going to change that position. And we are aiming for the next step of moving up to that partial compliance with a view to move that into substantial and full at the earliest opportunity. And so we've really uplifted the profile of EPRR, not only within the ICB, but also how we collaborate across the system as well, really looking at ways we can work collectively to make sure we're not working in silos when it comes to looking after our communities and patients. We're really committed to training going forwards this year. We're making a number of those core foundation modules mandatory to support our on-call managers. We're making sure exercise opportunities are available wherever possible to allow people to really engage with those and practice in a safe environment. Section 3 also sets out the resource that have been applied to EPRR. So through the management of change, we've now got a dedicated EPRR team, and we strive to work collaboratively across the urgent emergency care operations team as well to give us that resilience so that we can adapt, and recognising the crossover as well, that in incidents there's always that UEC crossover no matter what that looks like. So hopefully that gives a little bit of reassurance in terms of the kind of commitment that we're giving to the resource. Finally, the latter part of the paper is presented, part 2, sets out the EPRR policy for this year. So that policy has been refreshed. It's very much based on changes in governance, roles and responsibilities from the recent management of change to make sure that we're up to date with our policies. Really uplifting that profile across the EPRR, as I mentioned, and setting out that commitment to training and exercise. And this is a policy that came through the board last year, so minor changes, but just to note as part of this. So really in summary, what we're asking for today, as set out in the recommendations, is the following. So we would like for confirmation from the board that you're satisfied that we've got sufficient and appropriate resource in place for EPRR. To note the 2022 annual assurance rating of not compliant and the context behind that. Note and support the improvement plan in order to move us towards a better position in terms of our overall EPRR rating, and then improve the accompanying EPRR policy. That's all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Katie, for the very helpful overview of the report. I guess we'll open it up to any questions in a moment. Just in terms of the recommendation, I just wonder if we haven't already included this in the risk register. We should have that conversation to check if that's taking place. And secondly, I guess it's a really helpful opportunity to, I'll use the word, take the drains up on this really, to really delve into just how compliant we are with these standards. So while you've given the assurance that we have got the confidence to respond to those incidents should they arise, this gives us an opportunity to really satisfy ourselves on the remaining standards that we need to comply with, that we really are compliant. So I think although there's this supporting is helpful, that will get there, and we have the trajectory set out as you described. So just pause there and ask any member of the board if there's any questions. Tracy.
Okay, thank you for that. All of our organisations have EPRR functions, and one of the things that you talked about there was your policy being revised. Is that done in a way that aligns or makes sure that all of our policies are aligned and we're all heading in the same direction and not banging into each other when we have such incidents?
Thank you. So in terms of any EPRR documentation and policy, we always make sure we're aligned wherever possible. So as you say, we want to avoid that duplication and make sure that we're working collectively. So the policy really sets out the ICB position, but also how we will integrate with the trusts and our other providers to make sure that we optimise opportunities across EPRR. In terms of things, supporting and complementing documents such as incident response plans, we'll always set out the boundaries in which we anticipate and expect each other to work with it, so that where trust documentation is being produced, that can really integrate and dovetail with arrangements to give us that best position for EPRR.
Okay, thanks for the question, Tracy. Julie?
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to say that this has been discussed at Audit Committee a couple of times actually now. It's really important to note that although we're not compliant, the assurance that we've got around the areas where we can actually demonstrate that from a practical point of view that we're working very well on incidents. The other thing that was important was COVID-19 arrangements have been stepped down, but the actual arrangements have been stepped down very carefully, so that we could actually, as a system, step back at the end. And I just want to reiterate that the important part here as well about resource is there has been significant additional resource that's dedicated, but in order to make this work, it does need to make sure that we've got resource within directions.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, any further points any member of the board wishes to make on the report? If not, we'll move to the recommendations. As Katie went through them. So in terms of recommendation 1, board happy to endorse that. Thank you. Recommendation 2, annual assurance and plan rating and plan. Yeah. 3. 4. And if we can just add in that assessment around the register, would be helpful. Okay, so everybody happy to move on with that. Katie, thank you very much. Bill, thank you for all the work that's gone into this.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can move then into the quality and safety report, item 10, very happy to you to take us through that. And in doing so, Given that Josie isn't here today, would you mind taking item 13 as well? Any escalation through the chair's report from the authority?
That's fine, thank you, and I'll try and condense those together so that we don't end up repeating. Usual report, and I'll say it every month, but it should be a fairly self-explanatory summary. As always, a couple of points I just want to draw out for people's attention. The first one is just to say that we continue to monitor very, very closely the outcomes from a patient point of view linked to acknowledged pressures within the system, both in terms of urgent care and other delays. And we work very, very closely with our providers on that agenda. Linked to that, but also moving slightly on, I just wanted to acknowledge the added value of the Health Watch representatives and they're here today. Certainly in terms of the system quality group and the work that we're doing from a quality and safety point of view. The added value that comes from the two-way actually communication around what's being brought forward through Health Watch and what they can take away from the work that they're doing across the system, which really does help us all to target areas of real focus where need is arising. You'll note from the report that unusually, and it's a long time apart from COVID that since we've reported similar to this, but we have noted an increase in infection rates. They are being very, very closely monitored as there are some increases around MRSA, C. diff. Most of these are raised nationally, but we're staying very close to this through the various health protection boards, and we'll continue to report to the board on it should this become an issue. I think the CQC continue their local inspections across the entire patch, and we are working with and acknowledging the work done by all of our system partners to continue to drive improvements. A couple of positive things, and then I just want to pick up on Leader, if I may. So from a positive point of view, some really good work going on across the entire patch. It would be impossible to name and identify all of it. There's some really good work around harm-free care ambitions at UH&M. Lots of award nominations for quality and safety of care across the system. And I was both honoured and privileged for the third year running to be invited to present at the Staffordshire Dignity and Care Awards on Tuesday this week, which is one of the most humbling experiences where people are recognised for their personal contributions to improving the lives of people in any kind of care environment. And of course, some of that links back to what we were talking about from a learning disability point of view. On the leader matter, just to link back to your previous comment, Chair, you mentioned the leader conference that took place at the beginning of July. Really successful day. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there because I was elsewhere, but it was a real celebration of the work that's been done. Not to take any of that away, I think just to acknowledge really that leader is about learning from the deaths of people with a disability. And I think it's long before we get to that stage that we need to make the changes in the patient experience, patient pathway. But actually what we've given a commitment to is to make sure that we take every opportunity every time a death happens to ensure that we do all we can to try and bring down that gap that Karen described in the presentation. I think the Oliver McGowan training, and I think my face the Oliver McGowan training, again, I was fortunate enough to see Oliver's mom present at the Chief Nurse Officers Conference last year, and that was another very grounding session. And I genuinely believe that if we were to reach out to our networks and ask, I think we could get this off the educational agenda. And I'm happy to take forward that as let's see how we can do that, because I'd like us to lead the way in terms of getting this absolutely front and centre with our colleagues in education. I'll pause for a second there before I move on to Josie's report. There's only a couple of things that are very slightly different. Obviously, we complement each other. We had she's picked out two particular areas around public consultation information. So one was on the inpatient mental health services and one on views of the public in respect of assisted conception. Just to be absolutely clear, this was not a decision-making discussion. These were absolutely about making sure that members of the Quality and Safety Committee were made aware of the feedback that we received, and that therefore can go forward into any subsequent decision-making processes. We had our first update, and Joseph's picked this up, our first update since taking over responsibility for oversight of reducing inequalities, which was a definite right move, and that will raise its profile up the agenda of the Quality and Safety Committee. And then we did also have a briefing on the JTI, which is the Joint Targeted Area Inspection, which we go through with, in partnership with all safeguarding partners. That is due imminently in Staffordshire, so it's important that members were briefed on that complex agenda. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Heather. Any clarification or points anybody wants to raise on the report? Fairly self-explanatory, Heather, and thank you for that. And also thanks for just bringing out that bit of detail on the mortality review conference as well. Okay, colleagues, if we can move on then to item 11, which is the finance and performance report. And Paul, could I ask you to take item 14 as well, the exceptions for Megan Nurse, who's not here today as chair of the finance and performance committee?
Yeah, I'll do David. Thank you. So this is the first of the new look reports, and it's much shorter. But I think it says more. If you agree, we've summarised down the main issues in the reports, and we reported on the triangle that we agreed is system. The top part of that triangle being that we would make a difference to the numbers of category 2 and category 3 ambulance patients go through that route, and it's great to see that is actually having an effect. Obviously, not yet into the winter where we expect the greatest period of surge and stress, but it's good to see that there are some inroads into that. I think that's mitigation and the things that we take on board. This is a large thing. The report summarise what the key issues of the month. There are 5 headlines you've seen in the report this month. The first is that some of the escalation capacity has been in place for last winter. As we use the report, as we speak, it's still open. That capacity is not funded. The second is that the talks about this additional same-day emergency care capacity of the Stoke site, 50 extra beds. That's due to delays in approval. What's not probably going to be ready in time for winter. That creates extra pressure in the year ahead. Bill again will talk about this, but long waiters for elective admissions, 78 weeks, 104 weeks. We have pressures there. Fourthly, we are to identify now really the key area of cohort of patients that we need to focus in on, and it's the over 75-year-olds, which I guess is obvious, but we're really trying now to make sure that all of our action centres on the population, the greatest impact and need, and fifthly the money and the main drive of this slippage on efficiency. So as I say, Phil will talk about some of the performance issues, but David's going to say a few more words on finance, which obviously he's related to. So in the report, which is month 2, we're showing a plan of that period of 11.4 million, 4 million worse than planned. That has deteriorated into month 3 to just shy of 25 million. So it is true to say, I'm afraid, that the financial position is extremely difficult and challenged. I guess where we are at the moment is that we expect some of these risks to come through. We had a risk in the month, and we knew that there were certain things that we had to work on. We are working on them, and in fact, there's looking at some of the evidence this morning. It's one of the biggest risks that we're seeing is around continuing healthcare and costs of that, which have really escalated very significantly. So in terms of the financial numbers, it's looking bad. When we look at some of the numbers underneath in terms of the number of cases that have been approved, you can see quite a significant reduction. And in fact, a reduction of these is actually good news for patients, not bad news, because it means that we're finding different pathways for patients. So it's a double win, really. So we are expecting some of those risks that we've got in the position to start to stabilise. But on the other hand, there are other risks in the numbers that we're having to try and manage. One of the key ones is around elective recovery fund. Clearly, the impact of the strikes is having a very significant effect on the number of patients being able to see, and that in turn affects the amount of money we generate as a system for collective work. So the pressures are very, very significant. As they mentioned, efficiency, so a very, very significant efficiency program in the year. If you remember, it's 7.4%. I think this ever been achieved previously in any time over history. So we set ourselves a very, very challenging target, and we're really committed to it. But clearly, we always knew it was going to be massively difficult, and we are falling short. I think there's a number of ways of compensating that plan for non-recurrent means, but like I say, working against that are the continuing, until this point, the continuing high costs of particularly CHC and prescribing is what's really hit us hard. So the final thing really, I guess, is what we're doing about it. In this room on Friday, we had what we felt was a really positive conversation. All 6 chief executives from the system, the board and health, and 2 from the Zealand authorities were there and stood up and spoke very powerfully about the need to work together. And I certainly felt the real determination in the room amongst all colleagues. All colleagues were there across the executive teams. Real determination to fix it together, to use the skills and capacity we have within the system. We really joined together to get behind the big issues which we need to manage, and we agreed that firstly we'll do the CHC issue, which is a whole pathway issue we discussed. And we heard patient story and all patients, all residents start in primary care, and some are committed to secondary care and then on to community care and some into social care thereafter. But all patients go through that pathway, and therefore the way to fix it is together, and that was the clear message from the room. And this morning, Peter shared a bit of the chief executives and a strong commitment from useful colleagues to putting in the capacity and the skills that we need to fix this. So, I think the overall message is we want a positive message of we're in this together. We're going to work through this together. But we can't should have voted. It is difficult, and we are behind now, so 25 million behind, and clearly we need to act with real pace to get the number down as quickly as we possibly can. That's I think where we are, Chair. I think in terms of the report from the Finance and Performance Committee, it was drafted by Josie from Megan was away. There are other points of escalation, but they're really for points for information rather than specific action.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. And over to you, Phil, for the performance side of this.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy to do that. We'll come back to questions in a moment.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Paul. And I'll just add a little bit of flavour to some of the points that Paul's made already, really. So continued periods of industrial action are impacting on both urban and planned care delivery in our system. The system partners are working really well together to minimise that impact, but there is definitely impact there. But urgent emergency care side, we remain in tier 2 oversight, but we've seen some really good progress in terms of our improvement plan and also our strategy, which the region have given us some positive feedback on. Pressures that we've seen in recent weeks have been significant. We've seen spikes in trauma demand. And I think indeed some days last week were significantly busier than a January day, which proved quite challenging for our operational colleagues to deal with. But I think despite this, we've been able to show that ED performance has not deteriorated, and indeed we've maintained much lower levels of ambulance loss hours than we were previously holding, and CAP 2 response times, which is a real crucial measure for us as a system, have remained within 30-minute windows, which is really important. So essentially, we've seen spikes in demand, but we've been managing it within our current sort of capacity and delivery models. Bed capacity is pressured because we're having to protect so much of our surgical capacity in order to deliver the elective programme. Therefore, we can't do what we call outline, which is often when we have a surge in emergency demand. We will outline into surgical space because that surgical space is being used and our theatres are being pushed to the max in order to address the long waiters. We don't have that flexibility, so that has proven somewhat challenging. And as Paul mentioned, we have several wards of escalation capacity from the last winter that still remain open. focus for me at the moment is very much around surge planning for the next 12 months period. We're currently refreshing our capacity model as a system. We're increasing the sophistication of it from last year, and last year proved to be accurate, so that was good. And obviously considering workforce and finance constraints as part of that. But just linking back to the event last Friday and what Paul said, what I'm talking about here is how we will deal with the next period of time, how we will deal with winter. But these are all the effect parts of this. We've got to start dealing with the root cause, which is very much around, so Paul mentioned around over 75 demand and the need to further develop alternative pathways for patients to stop unnecessary admission and presentation to hospital. Just briefly, in terms of planned care, we remain in tier 1, which is national escalation. As I've previously advised the board, we've seen, I think, very positively a stabilisation of our forecasts over the last month. So although we're still not where we want to be, I think our ability to forecast and deliver what we've said we're going to deliver has significantly improved. At the end of June, across UHM and Nuffield, who's the local ASP, we have 339 78-week weights and 1,104-week weights. We forecast that to improve to 218 78-week weights across UHM and Nuffield this month and 504s. We're working very hard at the moment in terms of getting to a route to zero, which I hope to be able to advise the board of next time when we've fully worked through the detail there. Obviously, we have patients who are seen in other trusts outside of our geographical footprint as well. And at the end of June, we have 47 78-week weights who were largely split between UHDB and RWT, although a few were elsewhere. So we continue to monitor those as well. I think locally our challenges are very much focused around orthopaedics and spinal surgery now. So we've seen improvement across many other specialties, but high volumes remain in that area. We welcomed colleagues from the National Getting It Right First Time Girth team, who are now working in an embedded way within UHM, really supporting us in terms of booking, scheduling, and the way we work to try and make sure we're adopting best practice and getting maximum utilisation. As I said, Nuffield have been a significant support to us locally. We've transferred over 150 patients recently, and we've got another 130 that we're working through now. So we very much see that as part of the solution to the backlogs. And then just the final point, the last Finance and Performance Committee received the independent review into waiting lists, which was data quality management, which was carried out by Wendy Baines independently to UHM. That report was really detailed. We went through all of it at F&P committee, and we'll be keeping sight of the improvement plan from there through that, and also through tier 1 escalation meetings. I think that's everything in terms of those, unless Tracy, you want to add anything to that specifically.
Pretty comprehensive, and thanks for that. But thank you. We'll just take some points and then we'll bring to a conclusion, Julie.
So yeah, very good presentation, very good report in that respect. I've only got 3 points, if I can, I'll try and speak them quickly. The first one is around understanding the impact of industrial action, separately understanding the impact of industrial action. We're still in the midst of that at the moment, but that's going to impact on performance, but on money. It's going to potentially impact on efficiencies as well. So really understanding about that. I have a personal view, as Paul knows, around the impact of a move to actually ensuring that we allow people to stay in the community and the impact on continuing healthcare. It's really understanding, how that fits together in terms of trying to cut out the costs that actually insurance used in the wise and appropriate way. And the third point is around, I chaired People, Culture and Inclusion Committee, and we had some really good, we get some really good information at that committee. And what I feel at the moment is that we've triangulated our plan around activity, money and people, but we're not seeing that people focus in this report, the reported here support. So I think there was that particular one particular segment that we've actually really added value, I think, to understand that triangulation.
Quite helpful there. So just on the industrial action side, you want to pick in now?
Yeah, I mean, we've been monitoring the impact of industrial action, so we're able to understand how many procedures we've had to stand down as a result of that. And the numbers are significant in that respect. And, you know, it is proving very challenging, because if you have a specialty where that's the filtering of changing the function, then you can very quickly see a deterioration in that specialty's delivery. And we've seen that particularly in terms of cancer backlogs, I think, in recent years. So it does remain very challenging, but however, we just keep trying to manage the capacity we've got, put as much utilisation through as we can in the context of that. So again, I don't know, Tracy, if you want to add anything.
I think it's, as you said, we would really monitor the two very separately, don't we? So clearly see the impact of elective activity. We're also monitoring and reviewing the financial impact of the elective activity, and we have a clear understanding on productivity as well, but we've got to balance that against the productivity improvements that we're doing as well. So it's a bit up and down at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks.
And just to say, we'll pick up an action to address the points raised. I think it's key, so we'll work together to pick that.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, because that linkage across Julie was describing, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, we've produced the data on the report already, so I think it's just a case of making sure it's in there. We've got it together and absolutely form.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question was really around capacity and skills, and in particular, the point around bringing in the capacity and skills. And certainly everything we've seen in terms of what we know about the workforce and the data is that pipeline, certainly as I understand it, that pipeline isn't there where you can readily bring people in. I suppose it's just unpacking that about where the capacity and skills may come from, some assurance that we will be able to get the capacity and skills. This is it's a very challenging market out there in terms of reviewing the capacity and skills.
I can start on that. You may want to add, and I'm just maybe going to touch on the CHCIs and you raised just on the CHCIs. And Claire Underwood, who presented on Friday, describes 11 patients that she's personally visited. All would have had a better outcome and not required CHCIs, I think, and based on her professional evaluation. I mean, that's a really powerful thing. Sorry, what was the? But it was on skills connect. So there's a group of CEOs today who talked about that and said we've got to take that away and have a conversation about what skills we've got, utilising the skills in the system, then that can be appropriate.
I mean, that is it, okay, yeah, I mean, we've got the principle that, you know, we've got SP one of the biggest problems, and those sound obvious, but, you know, in the past, people who work going outside their organisation, I think we're now looking across the saying, as the theme that outweighed the CHC patients is the people we want to fix, and then we need to put our best people onto it. And the best people are obviously massively valuable and very, very busy already, so your point is obviously extremely valid, and yeah, finding those skills is difficult, but I think as Peter said, you know, probably what we'll do is move some people in and then backfill them, but we need to go through the detail and we'll go back to more when we do that. In fact, I've got a first meeting happening in about 2 hours time, where we're going to go through exactly what we need, so we will bring that back here once we've done that work.
I think it's a key point because the market is stretched, isn't it, at the moment? I think it will be thinking creatively in that space and different probably workforce models. So I think the workforce planning modelling piece is key. The other bit for me is how do we use different workforce supply models? I think there might not just be one solution, but actually can we manage the market differently in terms of it's solely reliant on those. I think maybe on temporary staffing supply and actually can we manage that differently? So I think that will be in the detail. I think modelling through those different scenarios will be key and very important.
Thanks, Alex.
Just on the CHC bit, you know, I think as Paul's alluded to earlier, this isn't a financial challenge in and of itself. We there are clearly financial implications, but they're driven by patients having poor experiences and us achieving suboptimal outcomes for them in the current way that we're configured. And I say that because the learning, I think, over recent months is that we are not going to commission our way out of this challenge. There are certainly things we can do. I've got a page full of notes that I can show you about the changes we've made, but in and of itself, that's a fundamental change. And I think what's going to come out of Friday without prejudging that is a set of arrangements that will promote greater system ownership of how we work collectively together to redesign pathways, and probably crucially have a greater consistency of where the balance of risk is across the different interfaces between different pathways.
Okay, thanks, Jack.
Thanks. I took it meaning straight out from a workforce or sort of supplying manual, which was for me is operational results. I just want to highlight, I think there's a couple of things from my perspective that think sort of works very closely with the people held around apprenticeships. I think we've got again sort of people from around two large higher education institutes that we yet to really fully tap. We generate an awful lot of health and social care graduates that lead out of Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent that we need to do something about bringing in. Having said that, though, we're Kew University and with the people who just embarked on a associate apprenticeship program that is the first in England, and everyone's looking at it. So I just wanted to have a, we've taken on us, and then I don't think it's Greenwich University. I didn't even know it was a university in Greenwich, but so be it. So there's a lot of eyes, and we're first to go with a lot of people. So when it's it, I think from CHC thing, I also agree. As a GP that's been involved in parents and CHC, it's an awful lot of pass the hot potato getting going on in terms of moving the risk. I think the culture has to change from sharing risks, which is counterintuitive from the contract model. I think that also improves care and reduces cost.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, so everybody happy to note the exceptions highlighted in the report, and note the report continues to evolve as we receive feedback from stakeholders. Paul, just go back to the presentation of the report. I thought it was very helpful actually in the graphic. And the other thing I'd say, these are really, really difficult issues that teams are grappling with at the moment, the money and the activity. I just want to thank everybody for coming together and actually trying to find a way through. What I'm hearing is, yes, it's problematic, but at the moment, people are not overwhelmed. They're actually still asking the curious questions, still trying to find ways of unlocking the best position we can get to this year. And obviously, there's a lot of enabling this year that will help next year if we can actually get that fixed. So we'll watch this with forensic oversight as we go through the rest of the financial year. But thank you for bringing the report on the risks so clearly to the board today. So if everybody's happy, we will move into item 12. Claire's going to take us through the insurance framework.
Thank you, Chair. So the quarter one board assurance framework is its final destination for this quarter. It's been through all of the committees, as you'll see through the committee reports. And I think it's fair to say that there's been some good debate with each of those committees. A number of changes have been discussed, which forward as summary, executive summary. So I think most notably, in terms of the back three around communities, the decision to transfer that from the responsibility of the Performance and Finance Committee over to the Quality and Safety Committee, and I think that feels fairly sensible. There was a helpful discussion at the Quality and Safety Committee around the consideration of doing some deep dives into water assurance framework. I think I would welcome that. I think that's really positive development for that group. And then as audit committee, there's been discussion around how we really ensure that this is a system assurance framework. And one of the things that we're taking forward as a system governance and risk group is exactly that, and looking how we can develop an assurance framework that triangulates and maps together the risks across the system. So that work is ongoing. I think it's fair to say that whilst we feel like we've come a long way, we're not going to rest on our laurels, and we will continue. And I'm sure Julie will continue to push us further and harder to get this really working for us. In terms of next steps, I've touched upon the system-wide mapping. Business cycle development for me is a real critical element now. What we need to ensure is that the business cycles of the committees align and drive the content of the BAF. So that's something that the governance team are working on and developing those business cycles so that we can absolutely ensure that where we have risks identified, the business of the committees is seeking assurance against those risks. And then I guess finally, one of the things perhaps taking a lead from Paul there, looking at how we can continue to develop more dashboard style approaches to reporting. So notwithstanding the need for the detail at the committee level, but what can we produce for board consumption that might try and elevate and drive a different kind of conversation around board assurance framework. So I'll leave it there and have to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that in the report. Very comprehensive. Julie, anything you want to add to the report from the audit perspective?
No, we're working very well. This is working through the committees and with audit. I suppose it's an obvious comment, isn't it? But we've talked already about the enormous amount of pressure all of these risks are made. So it just shows you just how much effort and energy and pressure there is within the system.
Any further comments on Claire's report? Everybody happy to take the recommendations, which are consider whether the Court of Honour scores and assurance assessments are an accurate reflection. And you're suggesting that as the case. Consider whether the actions identified are sufficient by the risk score of the parties for additional assurance. And note that further work is being undertaken on aligning the back and community business cycles to ensure full integration of that. Okay, so everybody happy to take those. Thank you very much. The final report we need, two reports that we just need to take on item. It's been showed up from a People and Culture Inclusion Committee perspective. Any escalations from the report that we have to enclosure 13?
No escalations.
Thank you, Chair. And under item 16, the audit committee, Julie, anything else that you want to add from the last meeting?
No, just to note that we've had an informed audit, so an audit opinion on financial statements and on both.
Okay. So in terms of any other business, I've had no items of urgent any other business identified. So we'll just pause and check if there are. Sorry, Heather.
Apologies, could I take the order quality report? It's a minor detail, but important from the governance point of view. We didn't actually ratify one of the decisions made by quality committee, and it was there at the top of the report.
Okay, Heather, thank you for bringing that back to my attention. Under item 10, I'm taking it's the ratified decisions in relation to the approval of the terms of reference for the health safeguarding forum. Thank you, Heather, and apologies for that omission.
Thank you.
Okay, so under item 18, we'll take any questions from the floor on any item relating to the discussions on the agenda. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick first one, it's a question, it's an observation. I noticed this on the third time of reading the papers. Paragraph 4.3, your report, Heather. University Hospital of North Midlands, the CQC maternity final report has now been published. The trust remains good overall, but maternity services have been rated as requires improvement with rating as in for safe domain, etc. trust is requires improvement overall. That was the publication of the publication from 2021, December 2021.
Sorry, you're right, Ian. Apologies. Thank you very much for pointing that out. We'll correct that. Correct.
Right.
I think
Please talk to the
I think the confusion's probably arisen because they've given a rating for both Printer site and Royal Stoke site. And Royal Stoke is rated good, but when you bring them together, it's an overall improvement.
Yes.
Okay, Ian, thank you for raising the point.
Right, the performance report, it's this significant outlier for 75-year-olds or older admissions. Could we have some kind of clarification, what mitigations, how this is being tackled, please? And is this a sudden occurrence or have we seen this being bubbling under for quite some time?
So just check, are we able to take that in sufficient detail today, or is that something that needs to come back to Ian?
Chairman, I hope we're going to address that and the long-term conditions, frailty and end of life as the afternoon progresses.
Okay, but being a significant outlier, would obviously need some kind of immediate mitigation surely.
So Ian, on just what Neil Carr's referring to, after today's board meeting, we have a deep dive into the end of life framework and frailty framework rather, as part of the portfolio development. So we will be going into that in a hell of a lot of detail this afternoon.
Okay.
I guess the point I'm making at the moment is, obviously you've asked your question.
Yes.
And what I want to make sure is that you've got an adequate response. And what I think we probably need to do is to pause that question.
Okay.
And come back to you in writing when the people are around who can actually make that detailed response. And we'll publish that in the minutes.
Wonderful, thank you very much.
Is that okay?
That's great.
Thank you.
Great. Right. The still open winter planning escalation beds. Do we know if the situation is similar in other ICBs? A. B. It's obviously a significant cost pressure. Are the escalation beds, are you going to have to negotiate this particular financial storm throughout next winter? Or will the escalation beds shut? And then notice on the third part is the same day emergency care build, the 50 additional beds of UHM are not likely to open until winter has finished. How are you negotiating these particular situations?
Thank you. So yeah, again, absolutely right. We're seeing across the region who we work closely, all the patches, I think they've still got pretty much all of their escalation capacity open. We've got 47% of it open at the moment, but we are looking to stand that down as much as possible during August. I'll let Paul comment if he wants in terms of the financial aspect of this. But from an operational aspect, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, if we've not got capacity to escalate into, as we move into winter, we've not got those necessary release valves as we head into those more challenging months. So we've absolutely got an operational focus on coming out of that capacity, but we've got to do it safely, and we've got to do it in a way that doesn't compromise delivery of our elective care plans. And then I think that the last point just around winter capacity, as referenced in the report, we're currently recalibrating our capacity model for winter. We know it's going to be challenging. There's no escaping from that. Although the business case that you referred to, we talked about earlier in the year, unfortunately, there's delays with national approvals of it, which means it's just not physically possible to do the build that we need to in time for December. So we'll have to look at other options for that, and our search planning groups across the system are going through that. I don't know if there's anything else for you, just want to.
Very, very quickly before Tracy comes in the cost of the escalation capacity across the acute trust, the NPFT and the cost and primary care is about 4.5 million of the year-to-date deficit. So it's quite a sizable part of the 25 million year-to-date deficit.
Thanks, Paul. Tracy, any?
I think the final thing that I would say is we're almost finished is the capacity and demand modelling that's just been refreshed as we speak. That will form a key part of our winter planning and what is the mitigation that we need to take. Because we know there will be a bed gap at this moment in time, and we need to decide, well, what beds are there? They won't necessarily all be acute beds, and certainly hope they're not all acute beds. So what type of beds are we short, and how are we going to mitigate that, and where are we going to find those beds? That's the discussion that we've got to have yet, Ian.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is virtual wards. Has any work been done on readmissions, not virtual readmissions, readmissions from virtual wards? Or virtual beds?
Yeah, so Tracy.
So I'm not aware of any specific work that's been undertaken. But I do believe, did you ask this question at our board last time? No.
I didn't ask a question at the last one.
Someone's asked that question already. Somebody for you to it, Ian, and asked that question already. So I do know it's something my medical director is looking at, and we'd be very happy to share that with you.
Thank you very much.
Ian, thanks for your interest, support and questions. And just check, is there any other questions any of our guests wish to raise with the board on any item on the agenda? Is anything coming online, Tracy, while we've been? No. Okay, so we've no further questions. Thank you for that. Just moving into meeting effectiveness, just want to go back to the behavioural combat that I referred to at the start of the meeting, and just to check that from board members' perspective, we have adhered to those principles. Everybody happy with that? And can I just check that everybody has had ample opportunity to raise any issues, either of concern or otherwise, on any item of the business that's been transacted today? Thank you very much. We'll bring the meeting to a close. The date and time of the next meeting is the 21st of September at 1 o'clock. It will be in public, but it will be via Microsoft Teams. So thank you very much, colleagues. Meeting closed.